Welcome to Stallion Confidential. Today's guest, I bet you, I can guarantee you this, that after this podcast, you'll reflect on your life, your health, your aging, and your recovery like never before. This is about a man that doctors said that he was fine, but inside he felt like he was an 80-year-old. Stiff, tired, disconnected from his body and his purpose. Then came out the grind, the gym, the research, the mistakes, GHKCU, BPC-157, the peptide as we all know, nootropics, bioregulators, we'll get more into that too. Every compound was tested, every protocol earned. From barely surviving 20 minutes on an elliptical to dropping 7 inches off his waist, building muscle, optimizing mitochondria, and reclaiming his masculine age. Who doesn't want to be and feel like a man in this world? From barely surviving the hormonal imbalance that he went through, Aaron didn't just biohack. He rewired his body, rewrote his energy, and rebuilt his mission from the mitochondria and up. Now, if you're curious, he's the guy you call when you want real answers on peptides, TRT, bioregulators, and how to turn fragile software dudes into real forged steel. This isn't Reddit bro talk. This is battlefield tested health mastery. I believe we should name this the health mastermind. Well, as your host, I'd like to present you Aaron. Welcome to Selling Confidential.
Thank you. Very interesting intro. Never thought of it that way, but yeah, when you think about it, yeah, it's crazy.
But tell because your story is so interesting, and because we talked behind the scenes about like how much you had to struggle and how much you had to start from the negative and above. Tell audience the story.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at it as a struggle at the time that you're going through it, but now I can safely say it was like the best thing that ever happened to me. And I think if everybody can kind of understand that, there's a lot of guys that are in that position. They've struggled, they're struggling, and there is hope. And that's one of the big takeaways that I had from that you can do things. You're not stuck that way.
And what made you want to make that shift? Like, what was a part of your life, the breaking point, the rock bottom that you felt, no, this isn't right. Something needs to be changed.
Yeah, and that was in 2013 for me. And when I was younger, I basically was glued to a computer from earlier than 13, but definitely from there on, especially through high school and early college. And it was one of those things where you can't ignore your health. We tell ourselves that, especially guys, oh, I'll put it off. I'll do it tomorrow. I don't have to go train today. I don't have to eat right. I don't have to focus on this. But you're going to reach a point where you cannot continue until you address those things. And for me, I hit that point in 2013.
And as you said, like in 2013, you had to start over. So the big idea is about how you fix your hormones and through peptides and bioregulators and so on and so forth. So for the audience, for the starters, for people like me, what is bioregulators?
So bioregulators are a type of peptide. So just real quick on peptides in general, you've got, carbs, fats, proteins. When we talk about proteins, they are amino acids. They're the things that when you put them together in a sequence, they turn into proteins. Peptide is basically a very short protein. It's only 2-3 amino acids in a sequence sometimes, and they go up to a certain point and there's a cutoff. So peptides are basically small proteins. Bioregulators are a type of peptide that work with organ specific, basically, or a tissue specific thing. They're very specific and they allow your body to do certain things. So we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's a very rough primer on what those are.
And I want you to paint me like a Jack versus John, like what's the whole scenario, because we were talked about it, and you have a way of explaining things about like how Jack is like age 25 and single with muscles and aesthetics, and his budget's not that much, but his time's flexible because he's in his earlier stages of his career. Also, his training consistently, hormones, and the ideal, I think, for every young man out there would be fat loss and muscle gain, right? And for a John who, let's say, is 42, his later ages, probably married with 2 kids, his intention of working out and training and recovery would be longevity. And his budget's comfortable, like he's good with that. Time is limited because a lot of other sectors of his life are pulling him in various different ways, the family, relationship, businesses, so on and so forth. But at 42, his metabolism is also slowed down. Stress levels high. Training maybe sometimes, but maybe comes with a lot of injuries. And hormones, borderline low testosterone. So if you had to put it in a way, and for people who are watching this from different age groups, how should a guy know if he's a Jack or a John, and why does that change everything about what he uses?
Sure. Yeah. It's all about the goals. So, Jack, he's got youth on his side. He doesn't have as many miles on, his basically situation. And so he's looking at optimization, but he wants to do it, say, in a cost effective way. And he also wants to make sure that he doesn't take shortcuts like a lot of former bodybuilders have done in the past. They took a lot of shortcuts, experiments, they pushed the limits, and as a result, they ended up potentially with issues that went on for or that caused them long-term harm. I mean, you look at some of the guys who used to set records, for example, in terms of how much weight they could lift or something like that, and you see that the state that they're in their 50s, 60s, or whatnot, it's not a pretty picture. And then you contrast with John, who's the middle-aged family man. He's got, like you said, he's got no time. He's got kids. He's got a wife, and he also has made a bunch of decisions. He worked hard to make money, but it came at the expense of his health.
Mm-hmm.
So they have very different goals, and so you have the same types of peptides available, of course, but you need to change the priority basically on what you need to fix.
Mm.
And that's going to be based on those goals.
So, Aaron, as we all know that there's a whole family of peptides out in the market. So, tell us more about like what are the generic ones that people know of, and how and why they should use that.
Sure. We've got the number one group I think most people think of is healing peptides. And
Correct.
so those are going to be the go to for, Jack and John, for example. And then you've got skin, you've got mitochondrial or energy related boosting peptides.
Mm.
There's ones that are even more specialty use, for example, boosting your immune system, or, if you've got certain other kinds of issues. Yeah, we can cover a lot of different subjects, basically.
So the most common ones I'm sure people have heard of are like BPC-157 and TB-500. Tell us more about it. Like what do each peptide does?
So they both work synergistically. And so, like, one of them is going to be more on the lines of injury recovery, but then in one aspect, and then the other, I'm trying to basically not overwhelm people with too many scientific details here.
Correct.
There's a lot of great breakdowns on these things already online. So the idea is that you want to use both together typically for most situations. The one of them is going to promote blood flow. One of them is going to, or promote, like they call it angiogenesis, basically building these capillaries into areas. Like, for example, a soft tissue injury, you work on you mess up your knee, for example, or something like that. There's no blood flow in soft tissue, and so this is one of those things that will help promote healing, because you need to build the roads that get into those that lead up to those tissues if you're going to get damaged things out and then put in nutrients to replace those areas that have been hurt in some form.
Wow, and that's all for healing.
That's right. Yes.
And is there a specific peptide between these two that you just mentioned? Would you pick one, or would you toss one away?
If I had to, I would probably lean on keeping BPC, but honestly, both of them together are great. They do so many different things. Dosage matters. Where you administer them matters.
Does the dosage matches on like your your wound or your weight? Like how does it go?
Yeah. So, for example, like if I'm, if Jack is, doing jujitsu or something like that, and he gets an injury, well, he's going to need an acute healing agent, and so that's where your BPC and TB-500 are going to help with that, and you're going to probably look at a higher dose at that point.
Mm.
Whereas perhaps somebody like John doesn't currently have any injuries, or maybe they've been around for a while, but it's not like super acute. He's got some chronic aches and pains or something like that, but he's also probably, because he's holding more weight than he should, he needs to reduce inflammation, right? And so those two peptides, one of the things that happens as a result of taking those things is it's actually going to bring down his overall inflammation in his body. And so that's going to make a lot of other things better for him. It's going to help his niggling little injuries get better. It's going to improve his brain performance, for example. And you're also going to see things like overall health improve as a result. His weight loss, if he's seeking that, is going to get better. Many things. So that's one of the things about these giant categories is that there's a lot of overlap. And so that's why it matters for what's your goal, who's the person, all these things matter. Where you inject matters too. You know, if I've got an acute injury, I'm going to probably inject near that site of that injury.
Right.
John may not necessarily have to. He may have, if he's looking for body-wide improvements, he might just inject a tiny insulin needle worth of peptides into, you know, his belly fat or something like that, relatively pain-free. If you got pinched really hard, it would hurt way more than that. Or maybe he just wants to take a pill for it, because now we're starting to see peptides that can be done in pill form, actually.
Oh, wow.
So it used to be that some of these things were exclusively injection only, but now we've got these options, which is great.
So why would a person go for pill over injections?
Fear of needles would be a big one. I would, you know, I've heard people talk about, you know, 95% of most people will never inject. So historically, a lot of these benefits have been restricted to people who've mostly gotten over that fear, or their need was so great that they just kind of bit the bullet, went in there and decided, screw it, I'm going to give it a shot. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I've had to inject myself with you know, testosterone for a couple of years now. The first 1 or 2 times you do it, it's going to be, you know, probably the scariest thing. But then you get over that hump, you do it, and you realize, oh, wow, it opens doors for you. Now you've got access to all these different things, but you don't necessarily have to. You can do these oral or other routes that are going to be coming out, some of which have just came out, so that don't involve injection. So, you know, basically like putting a, you know, a little strip that tastes like Jolly Ranchers in your mouth, for example, and getting the benefits of those peptides, or a pill instead, depending on what your goal is and how much you need to, you know, how much help you need, basically.
Yeah, so like also to touch bases with the pill versus injections, I'm sure there's also some downsides or like the catch to the pills, because there's a drug called Dynabol for like bodybuilders, like for the bodybuilder world out there. So it's in 2 forms. If it's building muscle and to feel like high test and all that. I don't know the specifics of it, but there's a pill form and there's injectable form. So the pill form goes through your livers, through your kidneys, and had to bypass that. So it's going to damage all of that along the way. Is it the case with peptides too?
So what you're asking about there is a typical thing. Liver handles a lot of the oral stuff, and so it's one of your most important organs. And so, you know, certain drugs, for example, are going to have to go through the liver. And like you said, it's more common when you take a pill that those are going to have to get hit by the liver. In this case, for BPC and TB-500, they don't really do that because they're going through your stomach. They are, you know, BPC stands for body protective compound. It's actually, they isolated it from your stomach juices already.
Oh, wow.
So it doesn't really need to go through the liver, basically. It's so small, it doesn't have to go through, it doesn't get processed to there. And so that's, I mean, what you're talking about, you know, part of the reason why you have, there's less effectiveness. That is the downside of the oral form, is that you have to take more to get the same effect. Or you can think of it this way, that injection will allow you to avoid, you'll need less of it. And that translates to some cost savings, basically. So that's really, like, you talk about Jack and John, you know, there's going to be cost savings if you can inject, but you don't have to do it. You're just going to have a slower healing process when you talk about using these peptides, or more specifically BPC. Side note, TB-500, you cannot currently take that one orally. You can with BPC. Some of these new things, when we're talking about, there's that Jolly Rancher tasting, you know, buccal strip, basically. This is one of the reasons why it's so great, is because you've got an option now to access peptides that you could not do orally before. So there is a restriction on certain, or was a restriction on some of these peptides, but now there's not. And There is a concern, of course, about drugs in livers,
Yeah.
but luckily in this case, when you do oral stuff, it's not something that you have to worry about liver toxicity.
That's a positive aspect, and actually a positive thing for people who want to get their hands on peptides. So now you're talking about cost effective with the pill and injections. Would you be aware of the cost between BPC-157 injections versus the pills and then TB-500?
Sure. And this is going to depend on where you're acquiring them.
Mm-hmm.
So, up until recently, people were able to get compounding pharmacies. Like you could go to a doctor, a health optimization doc or whatever, and say, hey, I've got this issue. And so they would prescribe these things to you. You would pay a premium for doing that. A compounding pharmacy would make these things and they would ship it to you and you could administer it. There have been changes recently due to the way that the government has made certain adjustments. And so one of the other routes is basically the research chemical route. And so this is another option. It's, in some cases, you need to do the vetting of, say, the research chemical company. If that's something that you're going to want to do, it's not something that a doctor can necessarily prescribe to you per se.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, you've got a lot of bodybuilders out there or people who've become familiar with this. If you've gone, you used to have a doctor that would be able to prescribe these things to you, but now he can't because the rules are changing in some cases for some of these peptides if they were not approved for a specific use. And so there are people out there who have the knowledge, who have the skills, they've used this before. There are certain vendors that they trust, they've done the research, they've made sure that the quality of the product is good. They're not just getting something somebody made in a bathtub somewhere.
Yeah.
And then, they're making sure that they're able to administer these things. If you do that, you're talking about, it depends on the peptide, $80 to $150 or something like that for, depending on the dosage again, you're talking maybe a week or 2 weeks or so. If you're going to go with an oral route, then you're probably looking at, $100 to $300 for a month supply or something like that. But you
wow.
may need to extend the amount of time that you take it because, again, you're losing some of that effectiveness. It's probably half as effective or something like that.
Aaron, talk about like metabolic and mito. So modern life nukes mitochondria. How does SS31 stack up against like cold plunges for mito health?
Well, SS31 is basically a overall mitochondrial optimizer. It does a lot of healing as well. So for somebody who's, in their 30s or 40s, again, they've had that life where, they weren't doing all the things they were supposed to. They were exposed to so many different toxins. Over time, your mitochondria get damaged. And so what happens is certain things can help with healing those. Fasting, of course, SS31 is that extra boost that you can use to heal them you'll feel, the energy. When I used it myself, SS31 is actually one of my favorites.
Oh wow.
Just for that reason, because that's what most people are looking for is they're looking for energy. They want what they had back.
Would you have any clue how does like this works? Like how in your body, like what does it do? Like as mitochondria, we know as the powerhouse of the cell. So it's definitely related to the energy. Like, give us more some insight on that.
Yeah, it basically repairs the membranes that are in the outer layers of the mitochondria. And so, again, there's people who can do a really good job of breaking down the exact scientific things.
Right.
And so, the main thing I think people should take away is that it's something that is a very good mitochondrial healer.
So Tessa Morellin dreams versus GLP-1. So what? How would you like define these two?
Tesamorelin is a growth hormone boosting peptide. And one of the nice things about it is that it is very good, and this is very important for, again, that middle-aged man. If you have body fat around your waist, you're in what they call visceral fat, the worst kind of fat.
Yes, stubborn fat, as we say.
Yes. So, and this is, again, the most dangerous that you can have. It's associated with lots of bad things that can happen to you. So tesamorelin is very good at getting rid of that visceral fat more than some of these other. That's not the only growth hormone peptide, but that happens to be one that's well known for helping with that specific area, for example. And sorry, what was the other part of the question?
GLP-1.
GLP-1s. Okay, so a GLP-1 is a new, I say new, it's a class of drugs that's been out since basically the 80s. They've found it, going back at least that far.
Wow.
And we've evolved over time basically to enhance them. They get better, basically. Yeah. So you've got currently semaglutide, tirzepatide, retatrutide.
Yes.
Those are the current, soup du jour, the best ones that you've got, for modern life. The first two, semaglutide and tirzepatide, those are the ones you're going to see TV commercials about, and they've been around a good while now. They're approved for use, obviously, and so those things are they're helping people lose weight and deal with their appetites that are those intense cravings and things like that that they're experiencing. And one of the things that's very interesting about these GLP-1 drugs is that they also have a very pronounced effect at helping break bad habits. So there are people who reported it helping them with their alcohol cravings or drugs or whatever it is that somebody's addicted to. They're finding that it gets easy, especially in that, say, first few weeks that you're taking it. That's the best time that you can use to make a clean break from those bad habits, because again, you're making a pivot in your life. You're saying, I'm not going to do all those old bad things that I used to do, and now I have this new thing. I want to use my energy. You've got a purpose that you're going to serve out there. And so these drugs can, in this case, help them to cut off the bad and focus on this gift that you need to share with whatever it is that makes you great and special with the world, basically.
Yeah. So touching base with visceral fat
Mm-hmm.
and stubborn fat, as we say, why is that there in the first place? Like, why do body stores and holds that fat, and it's so hard to get rid of?
Well, it's an interesting aspect of the body. I mean, you've heard of probably fatty liver, for example.
Correct.
Yeah, that's something that was used to be associated, as far as I understand it, with excess alcohol consumption. But our diets are such that if you just go to the grocery store, or nobody's ever taught you about health or what to eat, or what a macro is, your protein, carbs, and
Yeah,
fats and
yeah.
stuff like that, you're going to have a tendency of eating things that are not doing your body any favors. So, for example, if you're eating sugar and fat at the same time, well, your body loves sugar and it's going to use that and burn it. But that fat, can't it can't use two energy sources at the same time.
Gotcha.
So that fat, well, it's already fat. Your body stores energy as fat. So it's very easy for it to put that into your body. So it's going to burn the sugar, and then you're going to store that fat. And if you do that for an extended period of time, it's going to run out of places to put it. Some people store it in their butt or whatever. Eventually, it'll be around your midsection, especially if you have a high stress lifestyle.
Yeah.
You've got high cortisol. You're just trying to deal with that stress. Well, it's going to get stored around your waist. And some of it eventually is going to end up in that visceral area.
Yeah.
Your DNA plays a part too, where you store that fat. And so when that visceral fat forms, you got to get that off as quick as you can, because you want to have the healthiest life possible.
Wow. That's awesome, because for some people like me, or like I have a lot of friends, they feel hopeless that they have a lot of stubborn fat and visceral fat in the areas, and they don't like that per se because of the beauty standards in today's modern day. But I guess so. That was tesamorelin, right?
Tesamorelin, yeah.
For the stubborn fat. Got you.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of guys say they're doing everything right, clean diet, workouts, supplements, but still feel flatline. Is that like a mitochondrial issue hiding in plain sight?
It's usually a lot of things, and yeah, absolutely, mitochondria. You got to do the right stuff to get them working again, and so there's a lot of things that To be honest, I even said these things myself back in the day. Oh, I'm doing everything right, but the more I dug into it, the more I realized, well, and especially if I was being honest with myself, there's actually things that I could do to improve these things, but again, it's more of an ignorance issue. It's not that people mean to do these things incorrectly. And so once we have the proper information and we start doing the right habits, then over time we're going to start seeing those improvements. Your energy is going to pick up, and it helps to have a coach. And I know, because I've had coaches. Yeah, I didn't figure all this out by myself. I've had many mentors, and that's just because none of us do anything in life by ourselves.
Yes, I agree with that. And where do you find those and discover those mentors to help you out?
Some of it's a referrals. You've got friends who've succeeded. So you find somebody who's done what you want to do, and then you do it. What they did, and if they are in a better shape than you are, you keep doing it until you get to that point, and then who's your next mentor? Who's the next goal that you're gonna set for yourself? And you just keep trading up and your standard is going to change over time. First your goal is very limited. No, I just want to feel a little bit better. And next thing you know, hey, I want to start taking up martial arts and things like that. So
Yeah,
because now you've got the energy to do it, right?
makes sense. I see. So where do peptides like SS31 or MOTSC fit into this puzzle? Like, are they part of the same family?
Yeah, SS31 and MOTS-C are very similar. They're slightly different in their effects, but yes, they both help mitochondria in different ways. So, an example explanation I've heard is that SS31 fixes the hardware of your mitochondria,
Uh,
and uh, MOTS-C is more like a software upgrade. It
oh,
remodels things that are already there, but you have mitochondria maybe that are damaged, right? So you have to get rid of those damaged ones so that new ones can be created. So if I was going to work on my mitochondria, like what I did was I started with SS31.
hmm,
You want to get rid of the bad stuff, and then MOTS-C is going to help basically optimize what you have.
gotcha. And oh wow, okay. So SS31 is for software, hardware.
Hardware, yeah.
My bad. And Mode C is
It's the software
software.
upgrade, basically. So yeah, you can think of it as remodeling the house, and then MOTS-C is like decorating the
Decorating
house. I
house.
can't take credit for that, but again, my mentors have shared a lot of good things. I like that explanation is a good way to put that one. So
Gotcha. And if someone who's watching this and listening to this right now wants to find a mentor, like is there a specific place they can find them? Or what would you recommend?
well, I mean, once you start to search online for peptides, if that's something that interests you, if you think, okay, I'm gonna I'm doing all the right things, I'm making these habit changes and stuff, I'm looking to find that mentor. You don't have to look too hard to find them. There's people like myself, or Jay Campbell, or any of the other folks that are popular online that can really help you get that knowledge that you're looking for. You need that. You got to solve the ignorance problem. You got to get that info, and then you can start putting it to use.
Definitely, we'll definitely talk about Jake Campbell more about it because I went through his content and some of the questions that were asked. So we'll jump into that later. But so if someone's on TRT or peptides and they're not seeing the results, so is that a poor mitochondrial function or is it a little bit of all of the little factors of like their lifestyle?
Yeah, we would have to dig into the specifics of that person. There's so many different things that could be going wrong that you would really need to look at that individual and take it piece by piece and do it systematically.
Gotcha. What's your take on over reliance on nootropics and stimulants?
Yeah, it's a good question because I know some folks that have built popular nootropics, and the thing that I took away from what they would share is that some of them left the nootropics field purely because the types of people that tend to seek those out, they're looking for a quick fix, and they're not doing the underlying work that needs to be done to really solve that problem. So you can only use a band-aid on a bullet wound so long you're still bleeding. You've got to fix that problem. And so nootropics, if you're talking about caffeine, for example, or you know just stimulants in general, some people can't handle that stuff too.
Mm,
So it's important to really analyze your situation and go, am I leaning too hard on this? Am I pushing my body too hard? Oftentimes, I think if we're being honest with ourselves, the answer to that is yes. And so you would want to address the basics, wean off of some of those things. Some people are drinking way too much coffee a day
mm.
when they really look at the details.
Well, what's like way too much coffee in terms of milligrams?
It's going to depend on the person, but I personally can't tolerate very much of any caffeine, but some people seem to they say they can function on 4 plus cups a day, or maybe they're pounding a bunch of espresso shots or
Yeah.
something like that, or whatever. Um, how you feel is one thing, what your body actually is experiencing is another. So there's a popular measurement out there called heart rate variability.
Mm,
And you'll find that the morning after you do a lot of caffeine, or if you've been really pushing yourself, that number is going to show that your body has basically been put through the ringer. It hasn't quite recovered. You want that HRV number, generally speaking, to be up. And so it will reveal kind of, okay, well, have you slept well? The caffeine is impacting your sleep. Sleep is one of those things that I think I would call it the number one performance enhancing, thing
yes.
that you can do,
Yeah.
sleep properly. And anything that interferes with that sleep, it's doing your body a lot of damage, basically.
Wow.
You can think of it like If I'm imagine if you have a car and every day it needs 8 hours of maintenance a night, and that car will be, generally speaking, good to go after that. Well, if you're cutting your sleep short, or if you're, putting nitrous oxide, in the system or
Mm.
whatever, and your car, maybe it's not built to tolerate it or whatever, and then you tell your uh, mechanic, oh yeah, I'm going to give you less good parts. I'm going to need 6 hours or 5 hours. I'll need that car back after that time. You're not going to get your full 8 hours.
Mm.
You might be able to get away with that for a few days, a few weeks, something like that. There's going to come a point where that car is not going to be drivable anymore. It's going to be in the shop and need an overhaul, basically. So this is one of my problems with, I would say, over reliance on nootropics or caffeine or stimulants, more specifically. I don't want to throw out all nootropics. Some of them are brain boosters, and some of them are just stimulants, like, oh, I need to get through the day because I've been doing things that I really shouldn't have.
And do they have an addictive factor to them? Or is it on the person? Because one thing is like, oh, your body is craving it, and one thing is like, oh, well, you are reliant on these to the point that it's too much.
Well, I mean, look at caffeine. It works on dopamine, right?
Yeah.
So there is an addictive aspect of anything that you're, dealing with dopamine, right? So not all nootropics are necessarily going to do that to you, but caffeine, I think, is one of those that, when used appropriately and you can tolerate it from a, say a genetic standpoint, then that's something that would be, good to include. It does a lot of good things for you. It's just the potential for abuse is there, and it's so common, it's so available, it's so culturally acceptable. You've got coffee shops and tea shops everywhere. It's just a part of that. So, you just don't notice over time, the effect that it's having on your body necessarily, unless you really stop and do sometimes a self-analysis and look at some of your metrics and, what's your blood work say?
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing.
And as you also mentioned, that you cannot handle any bit of caffeine, maybe a little bit too much for you. What are some like indications physically or like mentally that you feel that like, oh, I'm very hypersensitive to caffeine or stimulants?
Yeah, so basically, I had recently done a DNA, what's called a SNP analysis. S as in Sam, N as in Nancy, P as in Peter. So it's basically means that when you have DNA, it's these 4 different letters, so to speak, and they're arranged in a certain sequence. And so when you have, let's imagine that a gene, something that codes for a protein in your body, something that does something. Let's imagine it's like 2 pages long of, text that you type into a Word document or something like that. A SNP would be a spelling error where one letter in that 2 pages is off, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
And so some of these things are benign, some of them are not so benign. And so when it comes to caffeine, this analysis showed that, based on my situation, that I am extremely sensitive to caffeine because I'm just naturally a very wired and focused person. I'm very good at sitting down, and I can, do 8 hours of just very intense mental work or something like that. But if I add caffeine on top of that, it's going to negatively affect me. It's going to over excite the situation. I'm going to be way too wired, basically. So in my case, if I'm going to have caffeine, I'm going to do it in the morning, and I'm probably going to keep it to 1 cup of tea or something like that at most, and certainly not over 150 milligrams of caffeine. So I think, what does that come out to? Like 1, maybe 1.5 cups of coffee, depending on how strong you make it, something like that.
Yeah.
So you want it early in the morning because it depends on how you metabolize that caffeine. So not only am I very biased on, I get a lot out of it, it pushes me way too far beyond, but I actually break caffeine down like 2 to 4 times slower than the average person.
Oh.
So that's another thing where, it can help. I know somebody who has that same caffeine situation where it takes a long time for them to break it down, but they don't get the over cranked sense with that. So that actually works for them. They can get away with more caffeine, but they still want to make sure that they cut it short. This other person, for example, like I said, they can have that caffeine in their body a lot longer, and they're not as affected by the over crankedness of that. So this is why it really does depend on the person.
Mm-hmm.
I would never have found this out per se, or never confirmed it. I had these gut feelings, right? I'm 38 right now, and so by the time you get to this point, you should probably know, generally how your body works. But some people are out of touch. they don't really stop and smell the roses and whatnot, or really listen to their body. And so, especially if I'm a younger guy, 20 something or whatever, I'm
Yeah.
gonna try and live that, trying to get as much done as possible. Well, you don't necessarily know what you are. I remember the first time I had an energy drink, I was studying for a calc exam, and I was, cutting it short. I had like 2 hours of sleep that night, and a friend of mine's, got me a Rockstar or something like that, and I mean, I could barely hold the pencils. My hand was shaking so freaking bad I
Oh
barely got through
wow.
the test. But I mean, it was worth it in that case, as the highest grade on the test I had all semester. But you know,
It does help.
it does. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's why I did it for a long time. But I've come to the point now where I've got healthy and I don't rely on it. I have other things I know I can do that'll boost me just enough or to get the effect that I'm looking for, that calm focus, which is what most people want, and not that overly, cranked, too jittery, barely hold the pencil thing that I'm talking about.
Gotcha.
And this is a benefit of that DNA analysis. I mean, I found a whole bunch of stuff about that myself then I would have never known 100%. There's certain things you just can't feel, and
Mm.
it does crazy stuff to you. Like, whether that's, oh, I can't have, cow milk, or maybe that's I don't metabolize certain drugs well. Uh, there's a risk about certain things. Like, in my case, I probably should stay away from methylene blue, which is a popular nootropic. It
Yes.
depends on the dosage. People who have been on SSRI drugs, which are antidepressants, a class of them, they got to be very careful with that. These are all things that are very important to know about, and I think that it's a very good idea for the average person here. While we're talking on this nootropic thing, go a little deeper, figure out what it is that you really need. What does your body need? What is it good at? What is it not so good at?
Got you. And let's say if you drink this energy drink right now, what would start happening to you right now? Because
Well,
it has about 200 milligrams of caffeine, as all the good stuff like camu extract, and I don't know, all the marketing things that they do. But what would happen if you drink this right now?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'd start talking a lot faster for one thing, but I can tell that it would become hard to control, so to speak. I'd have to, willpower would definitely be required, and even then, it's like I'd definitely feel jittery on the inside, and I might have trouble sleeping tonight. Tomorrow would probably get messed up.
Wow.
It's yeah, the performance. It's all about life is like a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that's one of the problems is you've got people out there who are thinking about today or the next couple hours or whatever. They're treating it like a sprint.
Correct.
It's a marathon. And, what is your productivity going to be like over the grand scheme of things? Not just, for this next hour. Plan better. Think about what's the best way for you to, you know, make your life as productive as possible to accomplish those goals that you want to accomplish.
Got you. And where do an average person can get that test?
There are many lab companies, or I should say, companies that sell these types of kits. I happen to go to the one that Dr. Anthony J recommended. He's ex Mayo Clinic. He's been doing genetic analysis on people for at least 10 years. He started out working with professional athletes, obviously very important for them. Anyone who uses their body to make money, tens of millions of dollars a year, they are the ones who were the ripe for the picking, basically, as to who's going to get the most benefit out of it. But then he opened it up to the average person. So his recommendation was a company called myhappygenes.com. And so the test, I believe it's under $300, and you only have to do it one time. And it's not like if you ran the test more than once that you'd get different answers. It has 99.9 something percent reliability or accuracy. And so if you ever ran that same test twice, that data is virtually identical. There shouldn't be any real differences at this point. They're one company. There's plenty of others that do it too. Popular ones are like 23andMe and stuff. Though some people have gotten a little concerned about the sale of their data. So if you're a lot of things that stop people from going and getting their DNA analysis done is that concern about where's my data going. So the nice thing about the one that Dr. J recommended, this My Happy Genes company, is that they give you full control over your data. If I wanted to, I could log in. They don't know my name or what my sample number was. I can go ahead and delete all that data and it's gone. I save it, of course. You probably want to keep it, but that way you have complete control and there's no privacy concern from that perspective.
Wow. And what was the name of that game that Jay recommended?
Dr. J recommended My Happy Genes as the company.
Gotcha. That's I actually never heard of that. Like that. That I only heard of that specific test that gives you full control on your privacy, which is extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole about DNA analysis, but the SNP is the basics. Like that's level one.
Yeah.
And nowadays, it's gotten so inexpensive that you can get your whole genome done for under $500. So that's pretty crazy.
Wow.
So that is not something that the average person needs to do per
Yeah.
se, but somebody like myself is very interested in optimization. That's on my radar
Gotcha.
because it allows you to get even more detail. Now it's not just, hey, these are, some of the most common issues that people run into. Now you're looking at your entire genome. You can actually look and find all sorts of weird situations or really tailor in your lifestyle to what is it that my body is good at or bad at. Again, we want to compensate for our weaknesses. We want to improve upon our strengths, basically.
Wow. And talk to me about like the SIP, magnesium, GABA stacks, and all of that. Like, do they help or just sedate? Now, because we talked about sleep and recovery, and
Sure.
sleep is number one optimization for basically everything because nothing's gonna work if your sleep sucks. So
Absolutely. And I looked at my notes and actually DSIP, that's how I'm going to pronounce it. I'm not
decent.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes it a little easier. But delta sleep inducing peptide is actually the first injectable peptide I took from what my notes show. So that again, sleep's so important. Exactly. That's where I started. Most people would probably start with BPC or something like that
Right.
if they've got an injury. But for me, I wanted to see, well, is it going to help my sleep? So yeah, I felt very well rested after taking it. It's going to depend on your dosage. A general rule of thumb with peptides is you want to start low and go slow.
Yeah.
And assess your tolerance. Just because it says on a sheet somewhere, oh hey, average person needs to take X amount. Well, you may not necessarily be average person. If you uh, go on the lower side, one of the advantages is, well, hey, you might save money because maybe you get the same effect with 100 micrograms instead of 500 micrograms.
Right.
That means you're using 5 times less, right?
Right.
So, hey, that makes your dollar go farther.
And is there a way to know like what's the optimization like optimized level for your body? Because you can start low, like okay, makes sense. But what if a person goes high? Will their body like develop some sort of resistance to like lower dosage?
Depends on the peptide. Some of them, the effect is, just wasting money. If you're going to do something like a GLP-1 drug, those semaglutide, tirzepatide, retatrutide, those ones you would want to start low and go slow on. Based on everything I've read and understand, the pharmaceutical companies have their recommendations that they pass on to doctors, but in terms of what people have actually tested, personally, bodybuilders, we have a lot to thank for them for experimentation and whatnot. They've found out very different things from what say a medical doctor might tell you. And if you can get a better response out of a lower dose with less side effects, then yeah, not only that's great, but the cost savings is great because those are even more expensive.
Right.
So it's going to depend the effect, the cost, the dosage, all of that's going to depend. You're a unique person and you're not going to necessarily get the exact same response as I would. I mean, you're a bigger guy than I am.
Yeah.
So for me, there's a body weight factors into that too.
Right.
And, there's a lot to it. Yeah.
And by getting that DNA test, would that like also give you some level of tolerance of peptides? Is that the case or not really?
Possibly. It depends. I would say maybe more so on the drug processing side of things. Like, for example, I found out I probably shouldn't do ibuprofen that much because that part of my, I don't handle that as well, as somebody else would in the liver, for example. There's a lot of interesting things that make us unique. And,
Wow.
that's some important information. Like, if you ever had to go into a doctor, you were getting a surgery, or, there's certain, common medications that they might prescribe to you, it'd be nice to know before you go into that. They're probably going to do some testing, but it might be nice to know for your own personal sake. You don't want to necessarily leave your health in somebody else's hands entirely because at the end of the day, you're the one who cares the most about what's going on with you.
Correct.
So you got to be your own policeman. You got to make sure that you understand yourself, your body, and then more information. Being prepared is always a good thing.
Not Google, guys, because that information is not on Google. That's minimum dosage. Oh, you can take 4 if you weigh above 200 pounds, and that's what people like me do because
Yeah, I would treat them as rough guidelines, but at the end of the day, you want to start low, go slow. That's the takeaway.
guys, gotcha. What are your top 3 sleep rules that outperforms most supplements?
Well, it's basically going to be diet for one thing. I mean, most people know, yeah, I should get to bed at a reasonable time. I might need to wind down and give myself that 1 to 2 hours away from screens or
Right.
something like that. My phone, anything that's like social media, really driving your, spiking your neurotransmitters, exciting you. So, in my case, I would say diet, especially because of what happened with a very close relative of mine. Um, we went through this process of doing a DNA analysis for her,
Yeah.
and what we found was that, because she struggled with sleep for, I don't know, 40 years or more. And can you imagine like going through your life and never getting more than 2 to 5 hours of sleep? It's not doing great things for your body.
Wow.
And I don't know how somebody can function like that, but the human body and willpower and discipline is amazing. And so, there are people that are pushing themselves to get through the day. And so what I would say to this person is look at your diet. The DNA analysis will tell you, for example, oh, I can't handle cow dairy. I can't handle gluten. And maybe you're not even celiac, for example, or, you can handle gluten itself. But one of the things that I took away from Dr. J's consult with me is I, for example, should stay away from it, not because I have a gluten allergy, but because of something called lectins. And
Huh.
those are basically poisons, plant poisons that are in seeds, for example. Varies by the seed. But these are act like gluten in the body and they cause a lot of inflammation. So what ends up happening is if you eat a lot of this stuff, it's very easy to do oats, certain kinds, wheat products, there's all sorts of those in the diet. Those are going to potentially, if you're one of these people that can't handle that, you're going to see that it's going to really cause inflammation in your gut. Over time, it's going to really just start to break down that lining. This is where some of those healing peptides can come into play, KPB, KPV, and a few other ones. Um, BPC, of course, being a gut peptide. Those things will help calm down that inflammation. And so what will happen is that your sleep quality over time will improve as you reverse that damage and inflammation that you've done to your body for such a long time.
Wow. Wow. Now I have to go back and think about all the times because I do have a lot of family members who are like in their 40s and 50s, always making excuse, oh, I didn't sleep right, oh, I cannot sleep right, and they blame it on their age because old saying, oh, if you get older, you don't need to sleep that much, you don't need that much sleep, but maybe they can learn and get that DNA analysis test.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my main takeaway is that you're never stuck with anything. Whatever, situation in your life that you don't like, there's something that can probably be done. And
Correct.
so you just need the knowledge and then you need somebody potentially to help you get through that learning curve quicker
Right.
or to bring this to your awareness. And Dr. J, for example, as far as the DNA stuff was great. He has a great bedside manner, like in terms of explaining complicated concepts to, the average person, your 70-year-old mom, for example, he can do it great. And there's lots of people we're starting to see the industry changing and things are really starting to become much more available and knowledgeable as far as getting that information out to bring this to awareness for people.
Gotcha. How should your training shift if you're stacking peptides, and can overtraining cancel out the benefits?
Absolutely. I think that's one thing that guys have a big problem with is overtraining.
Wow.
I went through a year-long coaching program, and one of the things that I took away from that was that it wasn't that people weren't training, they were training too much. Especially if you've been inactive for a long period of time, you need to be gentle with yourself first. You want to reduce that inflammation that you've got as your starting point.
Wow.
You want to go slow. Your goal is to preserve muscle. If your goal is fat loss, you want to preserve that muscle.
Yes.
You're not necessarily working on building it up right away. It depends on the person, right? So for me, as a formerly skinny fat guy, my goal, because being skinny fat is one of the things that's a big problem for people. You have more metabolically in common with an obese person than you do with somebody who's overweight. And so one of the situations that I had to do is get thin first, which is not something you want to tell a skinny guy necessarily.
Right.
I found that for me, losing that body fat was key because that inflammation, if you're in a stressed state, your body is not looking forward to putting on muscle, for example.
Yeah.
So you have to get rid of that first so you can build off of a solid foundation.
Gotcha. That's a good take on that. If someone's anxious, underslept, and not training, should they even touch these tools?
Yes, but don't use them as a crutch, as a thing to rely on. find the ones that are going to work well for you. If DSIP, for example, is the thing that helps you get that good quality sleep, it's your first steps. It's like treat them as like a cast. Like if you had a broken leg, well, you're not going to put all your, you know, uh, weight on that right away. You're going to lean on some of these things to help you through. But it really comes down to discipline and, again, keep continuing to educate yourself, work with somebody who can help you reduce that, to the absolute minimum amount of suffering that you have to go through, basically. So I would say that's perfectly fine.
So, Aaron, you talk about seasons of focus. How do you know what season you're in and what you should not be doing?
It goes back to your goals. So, Jack and John have got different goals. And so, I'm thinking mostly about people like John. And their goal first is to just get healthier because everything in their life is going to get better for that. So, for him, I'm thinking, help him sleep, help him get more energy. And from that, you're going to see this positive, the small snowball that you're building is going to, pick up steam and get bigger as you go. And next thing you know, your life is going to be unrecognizably better a lot sooner than you realize.
Gotcha. What should change in your training after, like, let's say 35? Like, should it be intensity? Should it be volume? Should it be recovery, or just the mindset?
I think it's all of the above, but don't be afraid of sticking to machines or something that's going to keep you safer because your number one gym in the rule is don't get injured. Once you get older, it's more likely that if you get injured, it's going to keep you out of the game for a while. You want to avoid that as much as possible. So machines are great. Don't necessarily have to do things with a barbell. I mean, if you're somebody that has restrictions, there's always something that can be done in a safe way.
Gotcha. And what would you say, like, is cardio more important after 40 or than it is in 20s, or does it muscle still rule the kingdom in that area?
Oh, I think it's both are needed. Cardio is something that people need to be doing. I mean, you're walking every day, right? You're getting cardio no matter what. So that's an important aspect of health. Low impact, I think that's a good point for somebody like John, for example. I wouldn't have him go and start, pounding out miles on a treadmill or something like that, actually running and stuff. That's not going to be a good thing for him. He needs to spend time doing walking, whether in nature or if he gets a, desk treadmill, something like that, something that fits into his life. Those are hugely important. So it's not either or. You need to do your gym stuff, but you are more to train, but you also need to have cardio in there.
Gotcha. And okay, we'll do that. And moving on to, like, I'm sure, like, because you keep a lot of data for yourself and how your sleep is. Would you think of these fitness trackers like WAP, Apple Watch, like Aura? Are they accurate? Does it work?
Based on what I'm seeing, they are generally accurate. It really depends. Some of them are better than others, and I would say don't overly rely on them, but keep them because you need to. When you analyze how you're feeling, it should be first, how do I feel?
Yeah.
And second, what does the data show?
Yeah.
And you can look at those two together. So it's not one or the other.
So, Aaron, like, as we all know that you have so much information, plethora, like whole abundance of knowledge that you've collected through the years, that you have struggled and dive deeper and deeper and deeper into peptides and whatever we're talking about today. What if a guy like me wants to hire you, like, mentor himself? Where can we find you?
Sure. I mean, I've been where you're at. I know what that feels like. If you're looking for somebody that can help you, I definitely can. The best place to meet me is going to be on X, Better with Aaron. I've got a Telegram group that's got great information in it, and you can also reach me by email as well.
Great. So we'll have that in a link down below, guys. And because I definitely know one thing, I'm gonna hire him as my mentor because I also have learned in the hard way that how important tracking everything is for you and your health and optimization. Because I was one of those gym bros who took pre-workout, thought like taking 400 milligrams of caffeine and going lifting 300 pounds was cool, but until I went through some shoulder injuries. We'll talk more about it. So this is the Stallions Rapid Fire. We put the guests on the hot seat and we do question them. But this is a very specific yet unique sort of rapid fire Q&A. So let's find out. So, Aaron, can peptides replace TRT if I am 28 and low T?
It won't completely replace it, but we've never been closer to a replacement. So there are some bioregulators that actually can give you, and it's a great that you broke out younger guys. That's who this could help. Somebody who's low on their testosterone, we can give them somewhere between 30 and 40% of what full blown TRT would do for them because of certain peptides. They're bioregulator peptides that are available now. So that is kind of a yes.
Wow. What's the best stack for gut repair after antibiotics?
Antibiotics? I would, well, you would probably want to take some probiotics, of course, with that.
Yeah.
But anything that helps the gut heal, I would say BPC, TB-500, and KPV, and a few other things I can think of that would be good for the gut.
Bioregulators, legit anti-aging or overpriced mystery?
I think that bioregulators are going to become, over the next 20 years or beyond, a key component in health for most people.
So I guess I was gonna leave this segment out for him that he could have explained you in his mentorship program, but just to be nice, because I'm a nice guy, overall nice guy, I'll ask him some questions that he only answers in one-on-one coaching. So Aaron, what's the best stack for healing from a shoulder injury fast?
The go-to, I think, for most people right now is going to be BPC, TB-500, GHK. So you can get those in a combo. So you're only having to do one injection, basically.
Yeah,
And then also Cardilax as a bioregulator.
got you. And preferably injectable.
Yes, some of those you can find ways to deal with pills. There are alternatives, but if we're talking strictly injections, that's the best of the best that you're going to get.
For the people who are like, I'm tired all the time, I don't know what to do, I can't focus, this and that, what's better? Nootropics, caffeine, or peptides?
I would say peptides because we want to get that inflammation down. You've
Right.
got brain fog, and so that's something that's interfering with that brain. Getting rid of that inflammation is going to solve that problem.
Got you. So peptides it is. And if you guys want more details, links in description. What are three blood markers a person should test every 90 days if he's optimizing?
Again, goes back to inflammation. I would say fasting glucose,
Mm,
high sensitivity CRP,
yeah.
and homocysteine.
Homocysteine for methylation and vitamin D plus hormone. Okay.
Well, it's a general marker of inflammation, actually.
And okay. And shows inflammation throughout your body, I assume.
Yeah, it's not specific. So it's usually associated with B vitamins or folate, but it can also be other things too. Anything that causes inflammation.
Gotcha. Talking a little more about feature and ethics because this is also a gray area that I assume that people don't talk much about or they don't know much about. Do you see a future where pharma steps in and bans or regulates these peptides completely? And what would that do to the space?
You can't peptide. You can't put a patent on something that is a derived from a natural product, basically. So a lot of these peptides, they're not patentable. That's one of the reasons
Mm,
why that's you're not seeing drugs your doctor prescribing some of this stuff. You could make that argument. It's how do you patent vitamin D? Well, you can't, right?
no,
So
yeah,
that's one of the reasons why peptides are great because they're just available and it's part of something that your body already has naturally in a lot of cases.
gotcha. And this is a personal question for me, from my side. Why do vitamin D3 or why is vitamin D3s used in rat poison?
I'm not sure off the top of my head on how that affects rat biology,
Yeah,
but in terms of human biology, vitamin D3 is very important, and you'd be surprised at how much so. I dug into that one a
right,
lot in my own personal research,
right.
and let's just say, you need to go out in the sun, 3 times a week, 5 minutes, and get some sun on your face and your upper body at least.
And is there a thing called overdosing in vitamin D3?
Not if you're getting it through the sun, but you can through pills. You can OD on that in the sense that it's going to cause calcium buildup in your blood, and that's not a good thing because then that's going to lead potentially to buildup of plaques and stuff like that. So you do want to avoid overdoing vitamin D3.
Or any supplement for that matter?
Yeah, of course. I mean, caution is always warranted. Nobody cares about your health as more than you do,
You do,
so
yeah.
monitor.
So how do we define the line between optimization, performance enhancing drugs like Is it intent, access, like results? What would you say to that? Like for sports, businesses, and mental performance, even
Well,
dating for some people.
I mean, there's a big difference between how you're going to do health optimization versus something that, a bodybuilder is doing to go beyond what is the ability of a human body to handle.
Correct.
And so, you know, if they're going to do something like that, they have a much higher burden of maintaining their health. They need to really pay attention to that stuff. I wouldn't advocate going out there and using performance enhancing drugs. I've focused myself on the things that are actually going to help me live to that 120 years old. That's one of the things that my SNP analysis showed, is that I actually have an extremely rare longevity gene where Dr. J told me, hey, if anyone's going to live to 120, it's going to be you.
Wow. And that you can predict someone's age through that test.
No, but it's basically how likely you are. I think that's pretty well studied from what he told me. And so there's, as far as longevity genes go, he said, I have the cream of the crop of what's available. So of course, he told me, hey, deal with all your diabetes genes and all that other stuff, live a good life, and, you'll actually be able to, reach that potential more than somebody else would potentially.
Wow. And is it a rare gene?
It is absolutely rare. He said, for somebody who sees as many clients as Dr. J does, he told me that it's been 6+ months since he last saw somebody with this set of longevity genes that I have.
Wow. Tell us how'd you discover Jay Campbell, and how'd you find him to be your mentors, and maybe some questions or doubts that he cleared up for you and that changed your life completely.
Well, at the end of the day, it all makes sense if you study, from people who've been there before. One of the things you'll find is a lot of us that are in this health optimization space came from a bad place. We were at a rock bottom in our lives, and so that's why somebody like myself is great to help the person listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
Is that we've been there, we know how what that's like, and so we can help you out of that faster. I'm grateful to people like Jay for the information that they've been able to spread out there online. And, in terms of education, it's been great. I mean, I'm going to continue with following him so I can keep up to date on all the latest stuff and get to the point where I start doing my own discoveries of brand new things instead
Wow.
of, blaze a new trail, for example.
Wow. And I'm sure your community and the people who join like your group would know more about it eventually. So for high stress, underslept guy, what would be a smart, safe first step to look in?
I would, again, cut the bleeding. Where are you having issues? Like, where are you pushing yourself too far? You're probably too stressed. I would focus on cleaning up my diet. I would increase my step count. Trying to get some walking out there, get a little peace in your mind.
Yeah.
You've got all these things, chatter, things you got to do, responsibilities.
Yeah.
Those all can be handled, but you got to get yourself into a good spot first.
Got you. What's the one peptide you think people will abuse the hell out of in the next 5 years?
GLP drugs for sure. I see a lot of people going about them the wrong way, and I think we've covered some of that already. So if you go and misuse those, then you can actually set yourself back. So, high doses of those drugs, if you don't do the right stuff, if you're not keeping on track of your health, if you're not taking positive steps, you're running the risk of losing muscle while you're on these drugs. You want to lose fat. You don't want to lose muscle. The older you get, the harder it is to get that muscle back.
Right.
So you want to keep as much of that as possible. And if you're shutting down your appetite, you're not training, you're not getting enough sleep,
Right.
you're going to have a problem where that muscle is not going to be there. Probably more so than you would if you were doing it responsibly at appropriate dosage and all that good stuff.
If you had to ban one peptide tomorrow, which one causes more harm than good?
I might be inclined to say PT-141 only because I think that people who have a potential to abuse that one. But honestly, my real answer is going to be GLPs, but PT-141 because that's something that I could see people abusing. And if you're a guy, that's a very embarrassing potential. To walk into a hospital and go, I can't get my erection to go away, and it's been more than 8 hours.
Dang. So that's a cheat code?
I would say you can get those effects if you do the right thing. Don't use the abusive, quick, short fix to fix something that you can easily do and get a much better response out of doing things the right way.
Gotcha. And one last question, and then we can wrap it up, is you get one last stack before retirement. What's in it and why?
Healing in mitochondria? Okay. I would say BPC and TB-500, and I would say SS31 and MOTS-C.
Get that. So, guys, if this episode saved you a dime or a doctor visit, hit a subscribe, like, comment, and definitely share it among your father, your mother, or your friends, and all your peers who actually can benefit from this information, because we have a genius in the house, and if you're not going to take advantage of his plethora and abundance of knowledge, you guys will miss out. And that's it from my side. This is a wrap. Stallion Confidential, and we'll definitely see you in the next one. Aaron, thank you for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Great pleasure.